The Forgotten Lighthouse. My name is Chris, and this is a story told to me by my old friend Frank Mueller, a man I've known for years and someone I trust deeply. A few months ago, I asked him to write down everything he remembered about what happened, and with his permission, I'm sharing it here. Frank was one of those people you meet once and never forget. He was in his late 50s when this happened. Sturdy build, weathered skin from decades working near the water. He had done it all. Diving, structural repairs, government inspections, you name it. He wasn't a guy prone to drama or exaggeration. He told me this story happened back in 2011 when he was contracted by Clallam County, Washington, to inspect an old, decommissioned lighthouse just off the Olympic Peninsula. The county had inherited the structure decades earlier, and no one really knew what to do with it. Developers wanted to tear it down. Preservationists wanted to save it. But no one wanted to pay. Frank's task was simple: head out solo, inspect the structure, and report on whether it was worth salvaging. The lighthouse was on a tiny rocky island off the coast of Cape Flattery, maybe 300 feet across at best. There was no dock, just a narrow ledge where a small boat could offload during high tide. The only structures on the island were the lighthouse itself, a rusted generator shed, and remnants of old scaffolding. He brought light gear, food for 4 days, tools, a sleeping bag, clipboard, and a marine two-way radio. The plan was drop off Monday morning, inspection through Wednesday, and pick up Thursday afternoon. When he arrived, the place was cold and eerily silent. The air was thick with the smell of salt, metal, and decay. The lighthouse was tall, around 50 feet, built in the early 1900s. It had the classic spiral staircase leading to the beacon room, which hadn't worked since the 70s. He did a full sweep the first day. Support beams, stairwell condition, window seals. The ground floor had warped floorboards. The second floor was a hollowed-out storage area, and the third had a tiny bunk room no one had used in decades. He rolled out his sleeping bag near the old generator, warmer and quieter than the upper levels. The first night was uneventful, but too quiet. No gulls, no wind, not even the waves hitting rock. Just an unnatural hush. By the second morning, a thick white fog had rolled in. Frank said it was unlike anything he'd seen. So dense, it looked solid. But that wasn't unusual for the region. That's when the weirdness started. Halfway up the stairs, there was a maintenance closet he hadn't been able to open on day one. Rusted shut. But now, it was cracked open about an inch. Inside, in the far corner, he saw a small wooden box, like a lunchbox, covered in damp sea moss, like it had been underwater recently. He didn't open it. He just shut the door and made a note of it. That night, something woke him. Not a sound, but the lack of it. Everything felt paused. Then he heard footsteps, not descending but ascending. Metal footsteps clinking upward on the stairs above. He froze, flashlight in hand, eyes locked on the stairwell entrance, but the steps never came down. They just stopped. The silence afterward felt worse than the sound itself. In the morning, he searched the tower top to bottom again. Nothing. But that box. It was no longer inside the closet. It was now sitting in the middle of the stairwell, halfway up. Same moss, same size. Like it had been placed there on purpose. He picked it up, heavier than expected, and saw that it was nailed shut. Still unwilling to mess with it, he left it near the stairs and went outside for air. That's when he saw something he couldn't explain. Bare footprints, wet and human, starting from the back of the lighthouse and ending at the cliff's edge. They didn't loop back. They just ended. He wanted to call for an early pickup, but with the fog, no one would be able to reach him safely. He went back inside, locked every door and hatch, and jammed the stairwell with an iron bar. That night was the worst. Around 1:30 a.m., the upper door to the beacon room slammed shut so hard it shook dust from the rafters. Then came 3 slow knocks. Not on a door, not a window. On the wall. From inside. Like something was tapping against the brick itself, just inches from where he lay. He didn't move. He just lay there until sunrise. When daylight came, the closet was wide open, and the box was gone. That was it for Frank. He radioed in a distress call, claiming a medical emergency. They told him they'd try to get a boat out by the afternoon. He waited nearly 7 hours at the island's edge, fog still thick, visibility nearly zero. Just before sundown, he heard footsteps in the gravel behind him, but saw no one. Panicking, he rushed toward the cliffside and didn't turn around until he heard the boat's horn. They pulled him out just after nightfall. The deckhand who helped him onto the boat asked, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Frank only replied, "That lighthouse needs to be sealed off." He submitted a short report, citing structural instability. He never mentioned the box, the knocks, or the footprints. When I asked him why, he said, "Maybe I was losing it out there. Maybe I wasn't." Frank never returned to that island. He phased out of fieldwork soon after. When I pressed him once, just once, about what he really thought happened, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Some places aren't broken. They're just sleeping, and you should let them." Later, I tried to look up the lighthouse. The GPS coordinates Frank left me didn't match any registered structure. The Clallam County Archive vaguely references an old light tower, but there's no official record, no history, no name. It's like Frank was never there at all. And that's the part that haunts me the most. The Cursed Lighthouse, Matinus Rock. They used to say the light in Matinus Rock Lighthouse never goes out, even when no one is there to turn it on. 5 miles off the coast of Maine, the jagged black rocks overgrown with seaweed were marked on fishermen's maps simply as Matinus Rock. The only thing on it was the old lighthouse, a solitary sentinel warning ships since the 19th century. It was officially decommissioned in 1983 after an automated beacon system was installed. Since then, the rock remained abandoned, visited only by seabirds, and a few things that didn't have wings. In the spring of 1997, Ethan Markley, a researcher of paranormal phenomena, arrived on a university-funded trip to document American sea legends. Matinus Rock was his first destination. He took a small boat operated by a local fisherman named Jack Stearns. The man was old, weathered, and silent for most of the trip. His eyes locked on the horizon. "Don't spend the night there," Jack finally said as they neared the rock. "Nobody comes back from there, whole, mind or body." Ethan laughed, armed with academic confidence. "I'll make sure to write about you in my report. The wise fisherman who warned me about ghosts." Jack didn't laugh. When Ethan stepped onto the island, the wind picked up strangely, as if the very air rejected his presence. He grabbed his bag and approached the lighthouse door. It looked rusted shut, but opened too easily, as if it had been waiting. The first thing he noticed was the spiral staircase. It was clean. No dust, no cobwebs. That was impossible. According to his research, no one had been here in 14 years. Or so he thought. He climbed up to the glass room where the light mechanism once stood. To his shock, The lens was rotating. Dimly, but unmistakably. A pale beam, cutting through the fog. Yet there was no sound of a generator. No source of electricity. And then the sun began to set. He decided to spend the night in the keeper's quarters. Still not afraid. Just curious. He placed a voice recorder on the old wooden table and let it run through the night. But the night wasn't silent. Faint sounds, whispers, footsteps with no source, and the soft, distant sound of a woman weeping. At midnight, Ethan woke to a gentle knock on the door. He'd been sleeping, or thought he had. He didn't answer. The knock came again, louder, faster. He opened the door. No one there. But the floor was wet, as if someone soaking in seawater had just stood there. He hurried down the spiral stairs, flashlight trembling in his hand. Suddenly, the creaking sound behind him. He turned to see the top door slowly closing, though no one was visible. He rushed to the outer door. But it was locked. From the inside. It hadn't been when he came in. He collapsed on the floor, unable to explain any of it. Then he remembered something from the old newspaper archives. In 1901, the family of lighthouse keeper Jonathan Greer vanished under mysterious circumstances. His wife and 2 children. Their bodies were never found. Some said the sea took them. Others said they were silenced by the light. The next hours were a nightmare. Each time Ethan fell asleep, he woke from the same dream. A tall man in a keeper's uniform stood at his bedside, eyes hollow, hands dripping blood. "They turned the light on while I was sleeping," the man whispered. "So, I had to turn them off." The last time Ethan woke up, he found a message carved into the wall beside his bed. "Don't turn off the light, or they'll wake it." He'd had enough. He threw himself from the window onto the rocks below, hoping to swim away. He gashed his leg, but managed to paddle toward the mainland. Jack Stearns found him the next morning on the shore, shaking, eyes wide with terror. "Did you write about me?" Jack asked with a half-smile. Ethan didn't answer. He just muttered, "The light never goes out, because they're still there. If you turn it off, they wake up." 1 month later, the lighthouse on Matanoose Rock was found burned to the ground. Nothing remained but a charred stone base. And the metal beacon, still rotating in silence, without power, without sound. Ghosts of the Light, the legend of Fallen Point Lighthouse. They say the light at Fallen Point Lighthouse only goes out when it wants someone new. On the misty western coast of Oregon, where the fog never leaves the sea and the waves crash endlessly against the rocks, stands an old lighthouse atop a jagged cliff known as Fallen Point. A name you won't find on tourist maps or highway signs. Only the oldest locals know of it, and fear it. In the summer of 2009, Lucas Hill and his girlfriend Ava Merritt decided to escape the city's noise for a peaceful coastal adventure. Both in their early 20s, they loved exploring abandoned places. They heard whispers about a forgotten lighthouse, unattended, unfenced, and accessible only by a narrow dirt road ending at a cliff's edge. Ava laughed and said, "Let's spend the night there and tell ghost stories. Make it unforgettable." Lucas had no idea the only memory would be their disappearance. They arrived at Fallen Point just before sunset. The sun dipped into the ocean, and the lighthouse cast a long shadow over the hill. Though clearly aged, the structure looked intact. The glass at the top was partly shattered, and the front door stood slightly open. Lucas pushed it gently. It creaked open as if someone had been expecting them. "Hello?" Ava called, her voice shaking. No answer. They stepped inside with a flashlight and a camera, planning to document their adventure for Ava's blog. Climbing the spiral staircase cautiously, they found the keeper's quarters thick with dust. But the bed was neatly made and cold. At the top, the massive glass lantern turned slowly. Lucas blinked in confusion. No electricity, and it's still spinning? Ava approached the glass. Suddenly, her reflection flickered. She wasn't alone. A tall, shadowy figure stood behind her, featureless and silent. She spun around. Nothing. At midnight, Lucas awoke to a soft knock on the wooden door. Thinking Ava was joking, he turned to find her still asleep beside him. He whispered, "I heard something." Before she could respond, the knocking returned, louder. Lucas opened the door. No one there, but the wooden floor outside was wet, as if something soaked had stood there. Ava stared down the hallway, whispering, I saw a shadow climbing the stairs." They raced upward. The glass room was open to the sea, the wind howling through. In the corner, a black and white photo lay neatly on the floor. A man and woman, eerily resembling Lucas and Ava. "Is that us?" Ava whispered. Suddenly the light went out. No one knows exactly what happened that night. What followed came from the police report. A car abandoned near the hill. A video camera shattered on the rocks. The footage was disturbing. Lucas speaks into the lens, then his face twists in terror. "They don't want us to leave," he shouts. The screen flickers. A strange woman's face appears, staring into the camera, smiling faintly. Lucas and Ava's bodies were never found. Since then, every nighttime visitor to Fallen Point shares the same tale. Whispers in the dark. A woman's sobs echoing from the stairs. A man standing silently in the shadows, unmoving, watching. Some swear they've seen two young figures sitting by the beacon, gazing at the horizon, as if waiting for someone new. A new guest for the Lighthouse. They say Fallen Point Lighthouse doesn't kill. It simply keeps you. If you see the light go out from afar, don't go near. The lighthouse has chosen you. 3 months after their disappearance, the case was closed as a possible drowning. But there were no shallow waters, no signs of a fall. Their families never believed it, and no one could stop asking, where did they go? Why was there no trace? And most hauntingly, who was the woman in the video? In the winter of 2010, investigative journalist Michael Darwin returned to Fallen Point. He had covered murders and disappearances for years, but this story haunted his dreams. He stood before the lighthouse at night, the wind tearing at his coat, fog swallowing the path behind him. Turning on his flashlight, he recorded in his voice notes, "January 12th. I've reached the lighthouse. No warnings. No barriers. Just as the locals described. Silent, yet not empty. It feels watched." He pushed the door. The same heavy wooden groan. Slowly, he climbed the stairs. On the first landing, he froze. There was a scent. Faint, feminine, but old, like perfume from the 1950s. Inside the glass chamber, something caught his eye on the wall. A phrase, scratched with nails or a sharp object. "We're not dead. We're just trapped." He couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard knocking, then whispers, growing louder. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw a shadow move across the glass, from the outside. By morning, he explored the base of the lighthouse. Behind an old wooden panel, he discovered a hidden gap. He pushed it, revealing a narrow tunnel not shown on any blueprint. He entered, flashlight in hand. Time felt frozen. Small rooms lined the passage, filled with rotting objects. Dolls, soaked books, old photographs. On the wall, faded handwriting. I'm Ava. We're here. They can't hear us. Michael trembled. He ran. But when he reached the top to escape, he heard a voice behind him. Why did you take so long? We've been waiting. He turned. Two figures stood near the glass, Ava and Lucas, same clothes as the night they vanished, but pale, their shadows moving ahead of them. Lucas spoke in an inhuman voice. We told you. The lighthouse never dims its light for nothing. You're the next one. Michael tried to scream, but his mouth wouldn't obey. Ava leaned close and whispered, Help us. Or stay with us. Then, darkness. Years passed. Michael Darwin became another name in the list of missing persons at Fallen Point. No one dared approach anymore. Only thrill seekers, or fools, as locals call them, still tried. Some returned, but they were changed. One, named Jason, entered in the fall of 2019. Returned 3 hours later, pale, silent, whispering, Ava, in his sleep. One night, he burned all his photos and scrawled on his wall, I never really left. I only watched from afar. Today, the lighthouse still stands, tall in the fog, against the wind and the void. And they say, if you pass by it at night, you'll notice the light turns slowly, then pauses, as if it's focusing on you. And if the beam hits your window, you're next. Because the lighthouse simply never forgets its visitors.